Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first of what I hope will be a multi-part series on Purim. I am looking to go to a deeper level than you may be familiar with. This is not an introduction to the Megillah. We are going to hit the ground running, and the title is Purim Unmasked. Allow me to set the tone. Amazingly, in Tanach, the 24 books of the Bible, the Jewish Bible, the Tanach, the Megillah Esther does not mention God's name once. Did you know that? This is incredible. We have 24 books of the Tanach, and all of them mention God's name, except for Megillah Esther. She has Shurim as well, but that's a different category. The Megillah Esther, can you imagine such a beloved, popular, incredible book? There's one glaring omission, God's name. God's name does not appear, not even once. And if you read the scroll, it reads like a newspaper. It reads like a political intrigue. It's actually an amazing story of suspense with a happy ending. Happy if you're not Persian, of course. But if you're Jewish, it's got a very happy ending. We're not murdered and annihilated. That's happy ending in my book. So if you love political thrillers, this is your book. And yet it's so ordinary in that regard. It's like reading the newspaper, or it's like watching The West Wing. Yet it's the seeming absence of God's name which actually defines the character of this holiday. And I'm going to try and explain what I mean by that one line in the whole class tonight. I'll repeat that last line. The seeming absence of Hashem throughout the entire story comes to define the character of Purim. And the central theme, therefore, of Purim, I'm giving you all of my answers at the very beginning, before we even start. The central theme of Purim is Hashem's presence behind the scenes. Okay? The central theme of Purim is Hashem's presence behind the scenes. We might not see him, but his guidance is never absent from the Jewish people. Now, this is a multi-part series, and I'm starting today my first class, but we're going to build on this step by step by step and see how we can build an entire structure. This is building block number one. An absence of God signifies the hidden presence of God. What are some of the clues? Now, again, what's beautiful about a Megillah that hides God is that we're dealing with a level of subtlety. And to the untrained eye, you'll miss it. You know why a magician is a great magician? Because we don't see the sleight of hand. We miss it. So when a person does a card trick on us, or if you remember when you were a little kid, your uncle would pull a coin out from behind your ear and you would be amazed. Why does the magician's card trick amaze us? Because we don't see the sleight of hand. So to the untrained eye, you'll miss it. But if you know what you're supposed to be looking for, then actually the absence of God is quite profound in the Megillah. And I'll give you just a couple of examples. I know if you've read the Megillah and if you're familiar with it, you probably could come up with even more examples. I'll give you just 5, okay? I'll share 5 examples with you where behind the scenes, everything is being orchestrated. I'll give you just a couple of examples. There's more, of course there's more. The whole Megillah is is God orchestrating every step? But I'll share 5. Number 1, Queen Vashti is deposed, opening the door for a new queen and ruler. That is not happenstance. That's not a chance. That's not luck. That's incredible orchestrating. Number 2, Esther is chosen as queen. Lo and behold, who is the person that replaces the most important person in this story? A Jew. It's Esther. Again, it's not chance. 3, the plot to assassinate Ahasuerus is uncovered by none other than Mordechai, the Jew. And it's written down in the book of Royal Chronicles. We write it down in the history book. And we never do anything about it. We never reward him on the spot. Number 4, the very person who is the arch nemesis of the Jews, who is plotting to annihilate everybody, is promoted to the position of prime minister, giving him incredible powers. That's not casual luck. That's not just mere fortune. Number 5, Ahasuerus is suffering from terrible insomnia the very night before Esther is about to go in, reveal her Jewish identity, pray, plead, and request and beg that her people are saved. And on that same very night, when the king can't sleep, he reads the history chronicles, because what is more boring than that? If you're going to try and fight insomnia, you want to read the Persian Chronicle. And he happens to come across the very page where he discovers that Mordechai was never rewarded for saving his life. In that very instant, when he discovers that Mordechai saved his life and was never rewarded, there's a knock at the door, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's Haman, who wants to request the authorization to hang Mordechai. And the queen and the king preempts Haman and asks, how should we honor someone that was never honored? And Haman, assuming that the king means him, suggests a fantastic royal plan. And ironically, the king tells Haman that that's how Mordechai should be honored in full view. Oh my God, you couldn't have written this. It sounds like a Gilbert and Sullivan play, I'll be honest with you. Like the coincidences, the chance, events and happening. It would actually be a fantastic Andrew Lloyd Webber. I've been waiting for it to come out. Alas, we have to stick with Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But you see, and by the way, I know if you're thinking of the Megillah, I know there's this example, there's this example, there's so many examples. I'm just giving you a few. But all and each and every one of these examples points to the same message. Behind the scenes, there's an orchestrating hand pulling the strings. And like a great magician, to the untrained eye, you miss the card trick and think it's magic. But that's because you're not looking in the right places. But that begs the question. Okay, you know what? I'm willing to go this far with you. Rabbi, first 10 minutes in, you've made a compelling case. God works behind the scenes, that there is a orchestration of world events and history. But what do we learn from that? Because sometimes it actually feels that God is not with us. And sometimes in the darkest, deepest moments of anti-Semitism, it feels that we're not walking through history with God. So I understand your thesis, and I can appreciate the pattern that you've outlined so far. But what do we learn if you're telling me that God is hidden? And it's here that I would like to introduce you to some source sheets. I have a collection of different sources. I'm going to be reading the English this evening, of different thinkers and different approaches of individuals from the 20th century. Some of them are contemporaries, some of them who lived 100 years ago, but mostly from the 20th century, that answer or try to attempt to give an approach. One of them is actually a website Torah article, but different ideas that coalesce together into a tapestry that hopefully will give you a picture and an image and an understanding of what are we to learn, therefore, when we approach God's involvement in our lives in a way that's hidden. So allow me to share my source sheet with you. This is what I'm going to give you, and I'm happy to hand this to you throughout. By the way, before I go to the source sheet, so far so good as an introduction? Are you with me? Yes? Did I lose anyone? I was just laying out the groundwork. Okay, good. Questions at this stage? Comments? No, we're okay? Okay. So take a look at the source sheet. Let me make it bigger for you. And hopefully you can see that. Can you see it? The first source sheet, number one, comes from the Talmud. And our first source in the Gemara, Chulin, 139b. Believe me, you have to study for years and years to get to page 139 of Chulin. That's tucked away at the very last few volumes of the Talmud. So the Talmud assumes that you've mastered and learned everything by now, and it asks an incredible question. Look at the following. This I have to read in Hebrew. It's so beautiful. Esther min haTorah minayin. Where is Esther alluded to in the Torah? Now, let me just explain what that question means. Many times, the Talmud, when it's looking for a source, the Talmud is the oral law. It's now written down, of course, but the Talmud will sometimes say, where in the 5 books of Moses, where in the written law, do we see this idea? Where's there a verse that can uncover and share this idea? Now, the Purim story happens 1,000 years after the Torah is given, okay? The Purim story, Mordechai and Esther, will be 1,000 years after the Torah is given. And actually, they are living in exile. They're living in Persia, okay? Under the reign of Achashverosh. And so what the what the Talmud is asking in this question is, we know that the Torah is a divine document and it encapsulates everything. And therefore, we can even ask, where 1,000 years ago, and the Talmud is written 2,000 years after the Torah is given. Can you imagine? So the rabbis of the Talmud, living 2,000 years after the giving of the Torah, they are so sure that the Torah is the basis of everything that they can ask a question, show me where in the Torah there is a hint to Esther. Okay? Do you appreciate that question? You understand the question that's being asked? It's a fabulous question. We could spend a long time just on unpacking that question, but hopefully that makes sense. And I'll read it in English first. The Talmud answers, it is written, I will surely hide my face on that day. Now, what does that mean? I will surely hide my face on that day. In Devarim, chapter 31, we have curses that the Torah speaks about. At the very end of the Torah, Moses stands up and says, you better keep this Torah, because if you don't keep this Torah, you're going to face a whole bunch of terrible bad curses. And this idea is introduced with a meta theme, with a large type of umbrella title. How do we understand curses in the Torah? God will hide his face. Now that also is fascinating. Because what that teaches us is that the curses in the Torah are not so much vindictive punishments as much as they are God leaving us to our own devices, to world history and world events, to the caprices of chance. And God saying, I'm not looking. I'm not looking. When I'm with you, I've got my hand over you, so to speak. I take care of you. I look after. But if you're not going to be in a relationship with me, then fine. You don't want me, then I don't want you. I'm going to hide my face. I'm not going to look. And that changes everything, by the way. That turns everything on its head. Punishment, suffering. God's never out to get us. God never zaps us. God never puts a lightning bolt to strike us. A curse is when God stops looking at us, turns his attention away, and lets the chances of life catch up to us. That's a very different way of looking at punishment and curse. What is the word for I will hide my face? In the word I will hide my face, the word is Anochi Hester Astir. Do you see the Hebrew there? Anochi Hester Astir. I will surely hide Panai, my face. The word for hidden or hide is Hester. And it's doubled up in the Torah as a way of showing that it's really, I'm really going to hide. Hester Astir. What name does that sound like? Hester Astir. Do you hear? Do you hear what name that sounds like? That sounds a lot like Esther. Amazing, Esther. So if we were to translate Esther, what's Esther's new name? If you had translated Esther into English, Mrs. Hidden, Mrs. Hiding, Mrs. Hidden. Fascinating, huh? So Esther means to hide. That already puts us on note. Let's take a look at text 2. Okay, text 2. There was a thinker in the 20th century, 21st century as well. He only died maybe 10, 15 years ago, called Rabbi Shimshon Pincus. Has anyone heard of Shimshon Pincus? Deep thinker. Many, many books written. They've started translating them into English. If you like deep, then you will love him. Because he operated on the level of deep. Okay? And they've started translating his works into English. Let's take a look. This is taken from his book on Purim, chapter 2. This is also the reason, I'm reading now, source 2. Can you see? You with me? This is also the reason for which none of the names of God are mentioned in Megillah Esther. Since if his name would be written explicitly, this would constitute a departure from the natural into the supernatural, which is applicable to Pesach. Purim, however, reveals that each aspect within nature is imbued with the love of God. Let's stop there. I want to unpack this, okay? Because that needs some translation. That needs some explanation. When we find God's name written in any of the books of the Bible, do you know what that means? It means that those books of the Bible are operating on the level of supernatural. What do we see when we open up the Bible today? We see miracles. What's the most famous of all miracles? The story of Pesach, right? The Exodus. 10 plagues, the miraculous, God splitting the sea. That is all supernatural. That's miraculous. But the whole point of Purim, and specifically why God's name doesn't appear anywhere in the Megillah Esther, is to teach us precisely this lesson. By showing God's hiddenness, the hiddenness reveals that within each and every aspect of nature, there is the love of God. And he finishes with a beautiful, almost flair, a panache at the end. Where does one find more intense love? On Pesach or in Purim? On Pesach, God raised us over the entire world. But on Purim, we discovered God in every nook and cranny of the natural world. By us discovering God in the hiddenness, by being able to realize that his presence was there behind the scenes, at that point, we were able to discover God in the ordinary. We could see what was underneath the tablecloth, so to speak. Okay, let's go further. Let's go further. Because one of the great themes of Purim is the poor. By the way, do you know what the word Purim means? Here's a great quiz. What does Purim mean? Judy's shouting at the screen. You're on mute, Judy. Take yourself off of mute. What does Purim? I can do it. There you go. Oh no, you can do it. You have to do it, I'm afraid. Judy, what is Purim?
Yes. Doesn't it mean lots?
Correct. A lottery. Exactly. Now that is a crazy name for a holiday. A lottery. Why call it a lottery? Philip has a question. Yes, Philip?
Well, I have a statement. It's not a Hebrew word. That's also important.
Excellent.
Excellent. It's a Persian word, I think. It's Persian for lottery, which is very important.
Amazingly, we have in the Megillah Esther an example of something that doesn't happen in any other book of the Tanach. Do you know what we have? We have a translation. The Bible says, and so Haman decided to have a lottery. And you know what the Megillah does in Hebrew? It uses the word for lottery using the Persian word. And then it says, now you probably don't know what the word for lottery in Persian means, so I'll give you the Hebrew translation. It means a lottery. And it actually says this in the middle of the book of the Bible. We don't find this anywhere. What a crazy, fascinating idea. Haman threw a lottery, and by the way, that word means lottery. Poor is the Persian name for lottery. So it says, I'll give you the Hebrew. Haman threw a poor, hu hagoral. And the translation is, Haman threw a lottery, and that means a lottery. Now, you never pick this up if you're reading English. You never pick it up if you're reading the English. But if you have a little drop of the Hebrew, you realize that the Megillah is actually translating the word poor into goral, because goral is the Hebrew word for lottery. Isn't that incredible? Okay, back to source number 3. Look at, we're on the same thing, same writer, Shimshon Pinchas. Look what he writes. This point is embodied even in the name and essence of the day of Purim, which is named after the drawing of lots, poor. On the face of it, there is nothing more natural than the drawing of lots, for one lot will always emerge from the lottery. At some point, someone wins the 649, right? Unfortunately, not me or you. But at some point, a number's got to come up. There's nothing more natural than that. And there is therefore room to claim mistakenly that this lottery only came out by chance. However, several examples in the Torah and the prophets demonstrate that the drawing of a lottery is in fact a direct expression of the work of God. Can anyone think, don't read on, Don't read on. Can anyone think of a lottery in the Torah? If you saw it on already, okay, no worry. Does anyone know of a lottery in the Torah? If you didn't read on, does anyone want to take a guess? Shaul, yes. You're on mute, Shaul.
Okay. When we divided the tribes, the
Correct.
tribes got their land.
That's exactly his example. I'll come to that. I'll read it right now. Anyone want to come up with another lottery? By the way, there's more than one. Yes, Philip.
One that I find eventually will be most significant for the holiday of Purim is the one where you choose the goat that goes to Azazel and the goat which is given on the sacrifice.
Excellent. What Philip is referring to is a special sacrifice that takes place on Yom Kippur. And on Yom Kippur, we had a sacrifice of a goat. Now, amazingly, listen to this. This is going to blow your mind. How do we choose the goat? We got two identical ones, and they have to be the same size, the same height. They have to look the same color skin. And we put two names into a hat. And then we pulled out of a hat which goat was going to be the sacrifice for Yom Kippur. Can you imagine? Of all days, the holiest day of the year and the center of the whole service, we do by a lottery. Is that crazy? And by the way, the other one, we send off to an evil demon, yet not before the Kohen Gadol proclaims all of the sins of the Jewish people onto that goat's head. And then we send away that goat to an evil demon. And by the way, this is what gives rise to the English word scapegoat. Isn't that fascinating? What's a scapegoat? It's a group or individual that you blame all of the problems of the tribe upon. And they're the one that needs to be sacrificed in order to get rid of all of the troubles and evil. That comes from the Yom Kippur service. But that, my friends, is a class for Yom Kippur. We're going to get too far afield. But what Philip did allude to is a great connection between the two, because if you've ever thought about it, that Persian name for lottery, Pur, is a Yom Kippur. Purim, Yom Kippurim. Oh my goodness. So what is the name of Yom Kippur? A day like Purim. A day like Purim. Oh my goodness. There is a lot more than meets the eye. Okay, let's keep going. We're over here. If you're in my text, yet several examples in the Torah and the prophets demonstrate that the drawing of lottery is in fact a direct expression of the work of God. This is the reason for which the land of Israel is divided according to lottery. Initially, each tribe demanded the best land for itself, such as the land besides the sea, etc. I mean, you can only imagine, right? You're coming into a new land. Everyone wants Florida. Are you kidding me? Who wouldn't want to live in a plot of land like Florida? Anyone want snow for 6 months of the year? No, thank you. No, thank you. Until one of the tribes stated that it desired only the decision of God himself. You know what? There were 12 tribes. How do you carve up that land? Everyone wants Tel Aviv. You think anyone wants Beersheba? No one wanted Beersheba. Everyone wanted Tel Aviv. Maybe Haifa by the sea. How was God's decision given? By the drawing of a lottery. Amazing. 12 tribes ended up living where they did because of a lottery. Let's go further. The essence of Purim, named after the drawing of a lottery, and this is the first mitzvah of Purim, the reading of the Megillah, which reveals to us the inner nature of the world. Let me go on a little more. We're going to explain. The Maharal teaches, the Maharal was a 16th century thinker, Jewish philosopher. The Maharal teaches that when God sealed the fate of the Jewish nation for destruction, when Haman was given over the Jews after Ahasuerus allowed him to do with them with however he pleased, this was considered as if it had actually ceased to exist. Listen to this Maharal. At that moment, when the king agreed that Haman could destroy all the Jewish people, it was considered as if the Jewish people ceased to exist. And God then created a new nation with a renewed acceptance of the Torah. Wow. The festival of Purim reveals not only the great love that is aroused at a time of danger, but even the inner nature of the world, the thoughts that we must think when we drink a cup of water and recite a blessing over it. Megillah Esther reveals the greatest closeness to God that is present in the world of nature. The power of Purim is in nature itself. Okay. Now, he just said a lot there. But what he is trying to explain is that Purim teaches us about the nature of the inner world, the ordinary world, the natural world. We take it for granted. Let me ask you a question. Where does fruit grow? On a tree, you'll tell me. And I'll say, how does it grow? And you'll say, oh, it's all very natural. You plant a seed, the rains come, waters the plant, it will grow into a sapling, the sun shines through moisture, warmth, a care and attention, the tree will grow, and it's the most natural thing in the world. And every single year you'll have apples growing on your apple tree. In fact, it's a bit of a burden because my apple tree in my front lawn has apples falling everywhere over the driveway, and my car crushes them. It's a mess. It's such a nuisance. I can't know how to get rid of it. I want to chop it down. The most natural thing in the world is apples growing off of an apple tree. And I'll show you an apple. And I'll go to IGA and I'll put an apple in front of you. And you'll look at me and you'll be like, yeah. And I'll say, this is the greatest miracle in the world. Do you want me to show you the greatest miracle in the world? And you'll be like, yeah. What, you're going to levitate? You're going to give me the future? You're going to tell me the 649 numbers? You're going to make fire and water coexist? Give me the greatest miracle. And I'll show you an apple. And you're like, okay, when are you going to show me the greatest miracle? And I'll show you an apple. And you'll say, what's wrong with you? That there's nothing more ordinary. But what he's trying to say in text 4 is that what Purim teaches us is that God, spirituality, miracle is within the natural. And there can be no closer expression of God's love to us. The most astounding thing, the most jaw-dropping thing is to live in a world of nature. Now, when you wake up tomorrow morning and you turn on the tap and have a glass of water, ordinarily you'll think nothing of that. But if you remember this class, then when you pour a glass of water from the tap, pause for a minute and you'll say, Rabbi Fishman was right. This is a miracle. This is a miracle. How miraculous is this? Amazing. Are you with me? Now you need to think about these ideas because truly they deserve contemplation. I'm not presenting you with mere ideas for you to be like, yeah, okay, I disagree. Yeah, okay, I agree. Our role, our task is to think about this and try and inculcate it into our lives so that for the next 20 years, every time we take a glass of water, we realize, oh my God, this is a miracle. Let's read a little further. Why do we disguise ourselves on Purim? This is from the amazing author Yankee Tauber. Don't know if you're familiar with him. He writes for Chabad.org. He has got such a great gift of writing simple English sentences that convey deep ideas. An amazing writer. Why do we disguise ourselves on Purim? Because on Purim, nothing is as it seems. Was the killing of Vashti simply one of those things that happened when a debauched Persian emperor gets drunk? Was it just coincidence that Mordechai happened to overhear a plot to kill the king? Did Achashverosh choose Esther to be his queen because she happened to be the most beautiful woman in the empire? Was it plain bad luck for bad Haman that he happened to visit Achashverosh just when the king was having Mordechai's heroic deed read to him? Was it Esther's charm and Achashverosh's flippancy that made the king suddenly hang his favorite minister? Purim was instituted because the Jewish people at the time understood that it was God himself who did all of the above to save his people. He was just disguising himself as a Persian palace soap opera. When God took the children out of Egypt on Passover, the entire neighborhood from Giza to Gaza and from Memphis to Mesopotamia resonated with the miracles wrought by the God of the Hebrews. When a small jug of oil burned for 8 days on Hanukkah, the most skeptical Hellenists saw that it was an act of God. Purim, the lottery, is unique in that the most miraculous of salvations was shrouded in the garments of nature, luck and coincidence. God was hidden and remained hidden. His name does not once appear in the entire Megillah. Not paradoxically, Purim is the most joyous festival in the Jewish calendar. It's great to celebrate miracles, but how often does a miracle come your way? Far more exhilarating is the realization that nothing is as it seems, that God is always pulling the strings, even when things seem to be just happening. I want to finish the last two sources. We have just another minute or so. This is a teaching that is written down by Rabbi Yitzhak Hutner. Rabbi Yitzhak Hutner was a Rosh Yeshiva in Brooklyn, and a famous Haredi ultra-Orthodox yeshiva called Torah V'Dat. Torah V'Dat is one of the largest yeshivot in America today, with thousands of students. It's in Brooklyn. And the Rosh Yeshiva, he passed away maybe the early 90s, approximately. He taught in Yiddish, and his teachings have been written down in Hebrew. Look at the following. This is a beautiful passage. Imagine two people are given the job of recognizing people at night. The first used the flashlight so that he could see the faces of the people and recognize them. The second did not have a flashlight and therefore had to teach himself to recognize people's voices. As to which one had a greater level of clarity, the first was superior to the second, since seeing a person's face is a clearer way of recognizing someone than hearing his voice. So far, so good? You're in a dark alley. You have a task to recognize a person. There's two individuals. One has a flashlight, the other doesn't. The one with the flashlight shines it on his face, sees him. The other one has to train himself to hear his voice. So who has a greater level of clarity? The first one, because he saw the face. Seeing is much clearer than recognizing than just hearing. On the other hand, you have to read that with the Jewish sing-song of a rabbinic voice. On the other hand, the second person has an advantage over the first in having developed the new skill of recognizing voices, which the first one has not. Now listen to his genius. He was known as a genius, Rabbi Hutner. In the morning, when the sun rises, the first one will turn off his flashlight, for it is of no use during the day. He will have gained nothing during the night, which could help him during the day. The second one, however, will always be able to use the new skill of recognizing voices, which he developed in the dark. even during the day. This is a very fascinating parable. There are two challenges presented by darkness. The person without the flashlight is forced to cultivate a, before this point, unused faculty, attentive listening. And that new added dimension assists him in recognizing the person he met. Now think carefully for a moment. That's the story of Purim. The Jewish people are compared to that individual. Because what did the Jewish people develop? The Jewish people at Purim developed a new ability to listen in the darkness. And they perceived God within the darkness. Do you follow that? It's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful idea. And with this, I'd like to pause. So let me sum up. In contrast to the holiday of Pesach, that commemorates a supernatural event, the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, the clear love that God has for the Jewish people that he saves, Purim is a very different type of celebration. Purim is a celebration that operates within the confines of nature. The favorable outcome encourages us to concede, hear that word carefully, to concede that God's presence in this world is also a presence that's manifest when it's hidden. And number two, second idea in summary, is that this holiday is summed up by its name, Pur, a lottery. A lottery seems completely random and coincidental. But indeed, the outcome of a lottery is ultimately controlled by God, as is witnessed by the use of lotteries in other areas of the Torah. Yom Kippur sacrifices, the division of the land. God is ever present in nature, and we are never far from him. And finally, perceiving God behind the scenes of the natural world required the Jewish people to cultivate a new sense, to apprehend and appreciate God in the natural world. And by cultivating a new sense, we grow as a result. What Purim allows for is a heightened, more mature, more elevated individual as a result of harnessing our senses and perceptions. This is Purim Unmasked, the essence of the name Purim and the essence of the hidden face of God. Thank you. Thoughts, questions, and comments? Hopefully I've given you food for thought. Hopefully I've given you food for thought. And I'll be very happy to send out the source sheets to anyone who wishes. Okay? Okay. I will leave you here for this evening. I wish you well. Have a great night. I will wish
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
early. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you,
I will wish
Rabbi.
you an early Shabbat Shalom. Oh, before I forget, next week we will